When we speak about family as a reality, there's both beauty and difficulties within families. When I think about my own family growing up, and even now, there's so much beauty. I think great, beautiful memories that I have, beautiful moments that I live within my family, uh, the experience of belonging, of being loved, and also just fun times. And then there's also hardships that I recall, conflicts, being hurting others, tensions in the past, and some still right now, and different crosses that we have had to go through, and some that we continue to go through as a family. And it was the same for the Holy Family, for Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Sometimes when we imagine the Holy Family, we imagine this kind of just because we see these images, right, of Mary, Jesus, and Joseph, just kind of all perfect. And there's some truth to that, because obviously with Mary and Jesus being sinless, and Joseph being a very virtuous man, I'm sure they were able to evade many conflicts. But still, there was joys, and there was also a lot of hardships they had to experience. I think maybe even before Jesus was born, right, Joseph having to take Mary to Bethlehem, and then him being stressed about what are they gonna do when she starts having coming into labor, right? And then this actually happens, and there's no place for her to stay, and he is just stressed and worried. How am I going to provide for my wife and my son? And then having to have Jesus kind of be born in this stable. Then there's maybe like joy, the beauty of the shepherds coming, and the kings, the wise men kind of thing. And then just a little bit after that, this stress of like they're killing children now. Herod has said they're gonna kill all the children that are 2 years under. And the stress and the hardship of, I have to go to a new place. I have to travel to Egypt. I don't know Egypt. I've never been. What if something happens to my family? Right? Then later on, the beauty of going back to Jerusalem. Then the hardship maybe of St. Joseph dying. And then of Jesus beginning to be persecuted and Mary suffering and seeing this, etc. Right? The list goes on. Just the point is that the Holy Family lived a lot of the reality that we live as families, insofar as just the beauty of families, but also the difficulties. In the midst of these beauties and hardships, God does have a specific plan, specific mission for families. And the mission is broad, but one of the core things of the mission of a family is the passing on of the faith. One of the core things, the missions, the goals of the family is the passing on of the faith. Ideally, once you get to know God and His love through one's family, and one should learn how to be faithful to Him, how to follow Him, how to respond to His love through one's family. One thing that jumps out to me in the gospel passage from Luke that we heard today is this constant repetition of the fact that Mary and Joseph are trying to fulfill the law of God. At the beginning it says, when the days were completed for their purification, according to the law of Moses, they went up to Jerusalem. A couple lines further down, just as it is written in the law of the Lord, etc. And then a couple lines more, in accordance with the dictate in the law of the Lord. Then they're talking to Simeon, and then again it says, when the parents brought in the child Jesus to perform the custom of the law in regard to him, right? Then you continue to read, and further down the road it says, when they had fulfilled all the prescriptions of the law of the Lord, they returned to Galilee. It's like 4 times in just this short passage. This sense of Mary and Joseph trying to live the law of the Lord within their family. And perhaps, Mary and Joseph could have said, we have the Son of God here, right in our in our arms. I think we're good. We don't really have to go to the temple or to follow this law. He's not even, Jesus doesn't have any sin. We don't have to offer any sacrifice for him, etc. Present him to the Lord. He is the Son of God. Yet still, they know that part of the importance of the family is this reality of passing on the faith, living on the faith within a family. An image that comes to mind is the image of a greenhouse. And when we think about greenhouse, it's this structure that helps kind of control a certain environment for the fact of the plants flourishing, right? It controls temperature, it controls humidity, and it helps, the plants flourish, their life to flourish. Now, the greenhouse does not guarantee that every single plant in there is going to flourish. Like some of those plants may die. But it does provide a certain protection, and it really does help. Like without it, most of the plants would die. But with it, right, so many of the plants flourish. And so it's the same with a family. A family is supposed to be this sort of greenhouse for the faith, a structure kind of that helps the flourishing of the following of the Lord. Doesn't guarantee, right, that everyone in there, in that structure, will flourish in the faith, but it's supposed to cultivate it and help that it pass on. Now, this mission is hard. It's hard, but it's a central mission of the family, and in a particular way for parents, right? This is really a specific mission for the parents, but it's not only for the parents. It's also for the cousins and for the grandma and even for the siblings and the children. So if right now you're a son or a daughter in a household and you're young, maybe you're 6 years old, or maybe you're 10 or 14, do you know that you have a job within your family and trying to keep the faith alive within your family? You could actually change and help the faith of your family grow. I remember when I was a kid, I must have been, 9 or something. I don't know how I got a hold of this little book of prayers, and there was a prayer there of the blessing of a trip, like before a road trip or something like that. And I don't know what like drew me to this prayer, and somehow I became like the person in charge of saying this prayer before we went on road trips. It was like, oh, Enrique, okay, the prayer of the travel, because I had suggested it or something. Right? So I made my little contribution, even as small as it was, right? For trying to help, right, the faith of my family flourish. My parents would suggest that we pray the rosary on the road trips, and sometimes they would forget. So sometimes one of my other siblings would be like, hey, mom and dad, we haven't prayed the rosary yet. We're going to pray the rosary, right? And so my siblings would be contributing, right, helping. Because again, while it's a main responsibility of the parents, it's not only the parents. Everybody in the family has a role to play in making this greenhouse, this structure that helps the faith flourish. So as we reflect about this, I just think it's important to ponder, do I see this, right, this reality of the core mission of the family being to passing on the faith, do I see this as one of the core missions of my family? Whether I'm the parent or whether I'm one of the siblings or the children, right? Do I see this? And especially, yes, if I'm a parent, but do I see it as a responsibility? Perhaps a temptation in which we can fall into is maybe seeing it more like maybe the job of a family, especially maybe of parents, is like, okay, I need to go to Mass and then bring my children to religious education, and then that's it. But that is really not enough. Why? Because the faith is not something that can be learned in a classroom. Faith cannot be learned in a classroom because the faith is something that's living. Like math, math you can learn in a classroom. That's it. You probably don't have to talk to the children about math. But the faith is something that's alive. It's someone. It's a lifestyle. It's following somebody. It's knowing someone. And so it has to be lived. There's an analogy that comes to mind. It's imperfect, but imagine that you want your children to learn about football, okay? And so what you do is that, when they're maybe 6 or 7 years old, you don't talk about much football in your house, but when they're 6 or 7 years old, you enroll them in this class that is once a week for an hour, and they go into this classroom, and then they just explain football in the classroom, right? So they get the blackboard there, and they explain, the team, and, the field is this long, and this is what a touchdown is, and they just stay there in the classroom every week. And then they come home, and you don't really take them to a game to, watch the best team like the Longhorns, right? And you don't teach them about them or the players, right? You never take them to actually go to the park and play and throw the football, right? No, it's just all in the classroom, right? An hour a week for maybe 2 years when they're 7, 8 years old, and then that stops. Are they going to learn how to play football? Are they going to love this sport or whatever sport it is? No. Because the sport is lived, right? I know so many young people that they've never gone to a classroom class for sports, all right? And yet they know so much about the sport, right? And they know all these players and stats and where each team is at and who's going to the final, what was the last score, and what is like the record of the past 5 years or 10 years, right? And they never went to a single classroom to learn this. How did they pick it up? Because it's being lived, right? In the family, watching the games, right, on Sunday, and we're going here and we're taking to the game and we're going to the park and we're talking about it, right? And it's just passed on because it's being lived. Well, it is the same with the faith, and it is much more important, of course, than sports. It is not a classroom thing. It actually cannot be passed on by a classroom. It helps that just like if you can learn some things in a classroom about football, like maybe like watching some plays and learning certain techniques or plays, right? But primarily it has to be lived. So do I realize this as my family, that this is a core mission and that I am responsible for making sure it is lived and so passed on? Like I mentioned earlier, this is a hard goal, mission of a family, but we have to strive to do it. And of course, like to do this, we have to live the faith, we have to come to Mass, the sacraments, right? Pray in the home, etc. But one particular thing I suggest to you, maybe you already do this, but just an idea of something that perhaps could happen more in your household is having spiritual conversations. And so this is maybe something to think about today. Are there spiritual conversations in my household? Do I have spiritual conversations with my spouse, with my children, with my siblings? How could this happen? How could spiritual conversations happen? Well, maybe on the way home after Mass, in the car, you can ask around, hey, anybody got at least one idea from the homily? And then people can be honest. No, Mom, I fell asleep. Father was just boring. Okay, fine. Honesty is good, right? But maybe another person was like, well, I actually was awake, and this is what I got out of it. Okay, great, right? There's a sense of having a spiritual conversation. Just like after going to a game, maybe you're hashing out the different plays that took place, right? And you're reliving the game, right? You want to talk about it, or after going to a concert, whatever it is. You're hashing out the experience, right? So you can do that in your car ride home. I also think, often when we sit down to talk with somebody, we ask them about, hey, how's your family going? How's your health going? How's, your job going? And do we ever ask, among our siblings, our children, how is your spiritual life going? And then do we listen? This is not a hidden agenda kind of question. How's your spiritual life going? Are you going to Mass? Are you praying every day? Tell me how much you're praying. No, it's just a genuine question. How is your spiritual life going? Oh, it's not going very well. I feel God is very distant right now. I'm going through this hardship. I feel like He's not listening, right? Can we talk about these things, right? Can we share our spiritual journey with each other? Can we have spiritual conversations in our family? And there's just more ideas you could probably come up with, but it should be just a normal reality. We talk about so many things. How come we can't talk about what is most important in our life, which is our Lord? May the Holy Family, Jesus, Joseph, and Mary, intercede for us as we try to build this greenhouse of our families so the faith may be passed on and God may be glorified.